Welcome everyone
Hey guys.
to another live lesson. Today's number 97. Can't believe there's been that many live lessons already.
Wow.
Guys, we have Jason Kliewer here.
Hey guys.
He is our gear guru. He is our he's the creator of Casey Drums, the kit that I was just playing on there. There was a few little mess-ups here and there, but other than that, it was
sounded awesome.
It was a cool play along. That's a play along track, guys, that we released through Drumeo, and people who are part of the memberships can download that. That was on last 96, LS 96 we released it. So
Cool.
Make sure you guys get that. It's a lot of fun to play along with. Today we're talking about how to tune your drums, right?
Absolutely.
Cool.
This is a fun one.
This is a fun one. Before we get into the lesson, though, I'll just go over some formalities. First off, guys, we're going to have lots of time for, hopefully we'll have lots of time for questions.
Yeah.
So ask your questions right below the video, submit a question, sorry. Also, we are going to give away some stuff today.
Cool.
What are we giving away?
We're definitely going to give away some really handy stuff. We're giving away a drill key from Evans, which is actually what I use on my drill.
So it's like a tuning key
super great. Yeah,
for your drill bit.
Tuning key, yeah.
Cool.
And we're also giving away a torque key. Which will be
awesome.
Those are always good to have.
Yeah, for sure. And we're also going to give away 2-month memberships as well, like usual on a Monday lesson. So how to win? You're going to want to go to facebook.com/Drumeo. Is that your phone, Jason? Shh. You got to go to facebook.com/Drumeo. And what you're going to do is you're going to answer or like us first off. Then you're going to write on our wall, I'm going to ask a question. And today's question is all about tuning. I want to know, how often do you guys tune your drums? Or how often do you replace your heads? Because I know if you're just sitting and jamming, or in your room, sometimes you can go months without tuning or without changing, or even tuning your heads.
Yeah.
So answer that right on our wall. Sorry, facebook.com/Drumeo. Just basically, I change my heads this often, and maybe why. It might be a price thing, might be a time thing. Who knows?
Totally.
Cool. So do that, and we're going to randomly select the winner. You're going to get either one of those cool little prizes there from Evans, or you're going to get a month-long subscription to Drumeo.
Cool.
Which is a lot of fun.
That would be sweet.
All right, so in saying that, we've got a lot to cover. You have a cool little setup there, Jason. So before too long, take it away.
Cool. So I think we'll first start off with the snare drum. Snare drums are usually one of the most finicky things to tune. And I just basically want to start by showing you guys something here. When you have your snare drum and you think you need to change your head. So what I do is if I think I need to change it, I pull it off just to see. And I don't know if you can tell here, but if I tilt it, just look at that. It's like a soup bowl.
Yeah.
This is a really, really old head. This should have been gone probably a couple months before it got to that point.
So what are some things to look out for when you have a skin that okay, it's time to change the head? Because I'm looking at that right now. Not only is it like brown in the middle because it's been worn so much, but I can even see little dents coming up.
Yeah.
What are some warning signs?
You'll see dents, and you'll actually see like little shiny spots from your head from your drumstick. You'll actually see it starts to kind of wear off the coating too.
Yeah.
And that's where the shiny will come through. Like the white coating will come off, and you'll start to get like the plastic underneath.
Yeah.
So you'll see that. You get a super brown or kind of gray-brown center, and you'll actually notice that your head won't stay in tune as easy.
Okay.
If you tune it up, it'll go down quite quickly compared to a new drum head. So
Does it sound like flat? Because I know sometimes like when it just droops in the middle, it's hard to get any sustain from the kick.
yeah, it sounds dead. It sounds flat, and there's no liveness to it.
Yeah.
So that's a really good indication. If you're tuning your snare drum, like every time you get into your drum room, I mean, you might have an old drum head.
Yeah, totally. So those are little things to look out for. And sorry to cut you off one more time here, Jason, but I forgot to mention that there is a PDF to this lesson, and you can download right below the lesson. And it's basically just a little tuning map, right? Which you will talk about and go over. So make sure you guys download that. And a lot of times the lessons are at a kit, just like this. Sometimes they're at a practice pad, but this lesson is a little bit different because of the fact that it's tuning. We didn't want to just do it on the kit, because that's another thing we'll talk about too in this lesson as well. So cool. Sorry to go on.
Yeah, no problem. So when you realize you have an old head, and I like to start my snare drum on the bottom. And what I usually do is I just turn off the snare wires, and I'll sometimes have to loosen them up so that I can get more slack out of the snare wires. Still don't have enough there.
And one thing that I will mention though is you're not doing this at the kit.
No, absolutely not. I don't think that tuning is a great idea to do at a drum kit, because you're always kind of in a very awkward position, and you're always kind of if you're sitting there, you're bending over tuning something, you can't get your ear to the ground, you can't turn your drum properly. What I like to do is well, because I build drums, I have certain tools that actually help me tune drums too. And one of these is just a simple like, turning work plate.
That's brilliant.
It's it's really simple. It's just plywood with like a round bearing. What do you call it? Lazy Susan type of thing, like you have in kitchen cabinets.
I was just gonna say you can use one of those Chinese.
Like when you go to a
something.
restaurant, you got like this spinny thing in the middle. So I just basically have a bunch of these, and it makes my job a lot easier to tune and assemble drums and stuff like that. So I always like to take my drums off of the kit, and I'll bring them to a table or sitting at a seat with this on your lap or something, whatever works. But usually getting away from the drum kit is super important.
You basically want to just, if you have to, just the fine tuning on when you're sitting at the kit.
Absolutely.
But if you're putting a new head or need to really, really retune it, take it away from you. You're more comfortable too. You can.
You're more comfortable, and you'll do a better job because you're not kind of in an uncomfortable body position too. If you're tuning, especially like a floor tom, you're trying to tune underneath, or you're trying to get down to your bass drum batter head, like you're always uncomfortable, and you'll just do a quick enough job to get it done. But I find if you're going to do it right, especially with new drum heads, take it off your kit, put it back piece by piece, and you'll have a better end result.
Cool. Good tip.
So this is what I like to do with a snare. I loosened up my throw off, and I had to adjust the tension on it so I had enough slack in my wires here. And I just put a drumstick in here. And one of the cool things about this Evans drum key is you can stick it in a drill. It's made for that. And so I have a little pocket drill, and basically loosen off all your keys. I don't necessarily do it in any specific pattern because it doesn't really matter that much.
When you're loosening,
when I'm loosening, I don't. If my snare drum's really tight, I won't loosen the whole thing all the way. Each lug, I'll go around and do it in like twos.
Yeah.
So.
Man, this is like speed tuning here at its finest. It would take me a good 10 minutes to get one of those heads out because I just have one of those basic keys. I got one of those drill
one of these regular keys. They're great. They come in handy, so you need to have one of those as well. But so this is actually a brand new snare drum. These are brand new heads on it. So for lack of time and stuff, I'm gonna just pretend this is a brand new head that I just put on here. And so now, what I like to do is I just tension all these claws down with the fingers. I don't use a drill if I don't have to. You have a lot better chance of getting it accurate.
So now you're tensing them, you're putting tension back on them. Basically, what you're talking about is how to tune the batter side right now, or sorry, the Reso side.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And if you're wanting to replace that head, you would have to take off the snare wires.
You would have to just take off one end.
To do.
Yeah, it's super. It's just like a key. There's a couple keys, and every snare throw off is a little bit different. But usually a couple of keys, and you can pull your wire back off. And sometimes I'll take like a little piece of tape or something and just mark it where the level is of my tension on my snare ribbon. And so what I do is when I get these all kind of, sometimes my fingers get in the way. And I'm just going in a circle, and you'll hear me, it's not the best way to do it. But actually at this point, it doesn't really matter. All I'm doing is I'm not actually tightening the snare. I'm just getting the threads down to where they touch the head. And I like this key because it has a long, straight kind of shaft to it, and that I can actually use with my fingers, and I can feel when I start to get tension on my tension rods. And then I just stop. So I make sure they're all like super, super light, like there's almost no tension on it at all. Just kind of make sure they're all roughly the same.
And here's a question from Captain Kickarse in the chat.
Okay.
He said, just how often do you change your Reso heads?
I don't change them an awful lot. I usually end up breaking them before I have to change them, and that's usually from just super tight tensioning and really heavy hitting. Mm-hmm. That's usually what I do. But you don't need to change them that often. They're one of those things that you can get away with quite a lot.
I think it's been a couple of years since I've changed my Reso heads.
Yeah, that's a couple of years is fine. You play a lot, you play a ton, and a couple of years and your snare drum still sounds great. So it's not something that you're going to need to really.
Batterhead, different story.
Batterhead's absolutely different story.
Absolutely different story.
And it's it's also a little bit more daunting than top head too, because you are dealing with the strainers, and it looks kind of intimidating to take this whole thing apart if you have to swap it all out. So it's kind of one of those do it as if I have to kind of thing. So.
Yeah.
So here we go. I have basically all these down finger tight. They're all sitting nice and even. And then now what I do is I kind of, in my head, I've done this a lot, so what I do is my first round, I'll go in, like on the tuning map, you'll see like a star pattern that I'm doing. And when I do that, I only do like a half turn with my key. So I'll just do one rotation with my key because I can, that's quite a bit actually when you're tuning, but just to get it in a certain area, you can do a little bit more. So I'll do like, I'll put it on and I'll go half turn.
And in reference to the tuning map here, you're doing 1, 2, because on there's a little map, I guess.
Yeah. So I'm starting at 1, usually is across from me. I'll start at 1, then I'll hop over to 2, half turn. Then I'll go back to 3, and then just half turn. 4, half turn. 5, half turn. 6, half turn. 7, half turn. 8, half turn. And you'll notice that my half turn was actually a little bit more than a half turn because the way I'm rolling in a circle, these hoops are super thick. And so when I tighten down this one, these two sides actually get looser. So I kind of had to, before I did my half turn, I had to kind of just snug it up a little bit and then do my half turn.
Okay.
Just with, different style hoops will do different things, but these are super beefy, so they do that. So,
did you get the last one there, number 10?
I believe I did. I might not have. Nope. So
beautiful.
Now we got the first round done, and at this point, it's not gonna be anywhere close. But I still always like to check because every time I do a round, I'll check it. If I don't, if I skip it and go to the next round, it's just gonna exponentially get worse if something's out. So now what I do is some guys will see tapping with a stick, and that works great. I actually like to use my finger, and I'll show you a few reasons why. When I'm using a stick, you like to kind of hit in the same distance all the way around, so that that's going to sound way different if I'm hitting this one here, or if I'm hitting it out here. It sounds different.
Yeah.
So it's always hard to gauge how far you're hitting. So I like to use my finger, and the reason I do that is because my knuckle is up against the rim. And I don't know if you can kind of see that on the side here. My knuckle goes against the rim, and so when I hit it with my finger, I'm always hitting in the same spot.
So don't worry about the blisters or the cuts that you'll get.
You'll get calloused on your finger, but if you do it enough, it kind of gets. We're actually not terrible right now. You just make micro adjusts.
And I was bugging you before. That's only an 8-lug snare.
It is an.
When I said, did you get the 10?
This is an 8-lug snare.
Yeah.
I like them. They sound a bit more open sounding.
Cool.
But yeah, this is an 8-lug.
So what are you listening to? You're just listening to consistency right now, I guess, eh?
Just consistency. And usually the two by your snare wires, you have to maybe crank them up a little bit more because of the snare bed in there.
Okay, yeah.
So yeah, I want to make sure that it's all sounding relatively the same. So we're pretty close, and for this, at this point, I'll keep going. I'm not going to have to do too much. And so I'll basically start again. And for a snare drum, a bottom snare, I'll do another half turn set.
Okay. So what we got here, guys, is we're talking about tuning the snare drum right now. After, we're going to quickly go over the tom, and then right beside him, you can't really see it in the shot, but we got a bass drum. We're going to do the bass drum next as well. And any questions you had, we'll get them in, because tuning is a topic we get tons of questions about, emailed and in forums and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of it is personal, but then again, there's certain things that you got to make sure you're doing, and what Jason's doing right now, you're just listening for any kind of in irregularities, I guess.
And you're always going to make just small micro adjustments, and as you go, I recommend every time you do a round, you're always checking it. So I'm going to go again. That was the second time, and I'm going to go just a quarter turn this time.
Sounds good.
not much to do there. Okay, you know, and you can keep going over and keep going over and keep going over, and you're going to get to a point where it's going to be definitely good enough. And at this point, I would probably leave it because I don't know where the snare drum, the whole tone is at right now. So I'm going to leave it at more of a, this is quite a, I would say a medium high pitch for the bottom. So I'm going to leave that right now, and I'm going to flip it over, and we'll talk about the batter head.
Cool.
Because this is where everybody changes this all the time, or should change it all the time. And so it's the same procedure as the bottom. So I loosened off all these, and so this is a brand new head. So I'm going to, you know, this is exactly what I would be starting with when I put it on.
Sure, yeah. And do you do anything, like when you first put a head on, do you like do anything to seat it, or maybe, because I know some people put their fist in there and kind of stretch it out?
What I do usually is I will just get these all finger tight, and then if it's, especially batter heads, Reso heads, I find doesn't make as big of a difference.
Yeah.
But I'll show you just in a sec here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just, depending on the drum, sometimes I'll put my fist in it or my elbow. If it's a fairly thick head, I'll use like my elbow or sometimes your knee.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But depends how thick of a head it is if you don't want to pop through it. So I get these just finger tight again, seated in a circle. Doesn't really, at this point, it's not going to make a whole lot of difference. So it's kind of the way it is. And what I'll do is I'll just go something like this.
Kind of like how a guitar player stretches the strings.
Exactly. It's the exact same thing. It kind of gets it used to its environment here, and then it'll actually stay in tune nicer. So now that I did that, I'm going to go around and check and make sure, yeah, that one was a lot looser than this one. Still tight, a little bit loose. You can see where the head wants to stretch in different places. So I just said seat it all again. Then I put it back to 0. Which for me, I usually put the front of my drum opposite of me.
Okay.
Start number 1, half turn.
And a lot of it you're feeling too, because I noticed like if there's a little bit more of a turn like you were talking about before, just because of the way that it seats.
So the way that it seats, I usually try to turn it just a little extra because it often loosens itself as you go. Yeah. So I'm doing it also quickly here too.
Sure,
so
of course.
We can get through all these things.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So yeah, first round, tap it. It's still like, it's way out because I stretched it pretty nice. There's a few that are. And I'm not necessarily going in a star pattern at this point. Just to kind of get it back in its normal spot.
Matthew Duckett was saying, I use a drum dial just to get the drum up to pitch and then fine tune by ear. That's a really cool strategy. And we are going to be giving away, I just kicked the mic. We are going to be giving away a drum dial too. Just one by Evans, and you can use them. I've never used them myself, but I do know a couple of people that do use them, and they say they love them. So.
Yeah, drum dials are really great. I would use one if I have a whole bunch of snares that I'm assembling it all at one time, and you got to do it pretty quick.
Yeah.
But for one-off stuff, I usually don't because I like using my ear. I trust it more.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Sure.
Definitely, this head is stretched now, nice and tight. So now I think I'm relatively close at this point. I want to go for another round here at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Same thing. You don't need to crank it. You don't need to hit it super hard. You're just listening to try and get some kind of tone. This one's a question from Daniel Hallbrook.
He says, sorry I wasn't able to watch it live, but I'll catch it in the archives. He says, his question is, does tuning on different types of wood change the characteristics of the sound qualities overall? Birch, maple, oak, stuff like that.
Different woods are going to react to different tensions and stuff a little bit more, but your tone of your drum will probably stay in the same kind of family of sound. It just will alter the nuances to it, the thickness of the sound, the thuddiness or the kind of more fragile sounding. But you're still going to get the original sound of your drum.
Cool.
You know, putting different heads on it can make drums sound totally different, but they're still going to sound like that birch tom that you have. It's still going to sound exactly the same.
Yeah.
For the most part, you know, you're not going to get a carbon fiber sounding shell and then put a different head on it. You're not going to get, you know, a maple sounding shell. It's not going to be the same. So.
Awesome. So after that, I was just gonna say after this we should go on to the bass drum because it's already 4:25 and we still got.
Awesome. So at this point, I would leave it, put up my snare strainers again, and check and see what it sounds like, and then adjust your strainers. It's hard to do it on the table. Sounds pretty nice. Got a good crack to it. It's in the tuning range where I want it, and so I would actually be fairly comfortable with putting it on a kit and seeing what happens to it.
Yeah.
So.
Again, we don't have this mic'd. It's just using the room mics in there, so you can get the full range of what we're doing here. Okay, before you do that bass drum, get it all into place. I'm gonna give away some stuff.
Cool.
I'm gonna give away that drum dial we're talking about. So I'm gonna go to my Facebook page here, the Drumeo Facebook page, and I asked you guys how often do you tune your drums or how often do you change your heads? And for me, I wish I changed my heads more often. It's a matter of getting the actual heads in there. And I tune my drums whenever I really notice them sounding like garbage. So let's see what you guys said. Give me one sec here. Okay, so the first person to win. Okay, here we go. First person to win is Marcos Sierra. Marcos Sierra says this lesson was very important because tune is very important for drummers, and I have no doubt how to tune. This video is going to be great for me. Thanks. You didn't really answer the question, but that's okay because you did a post about tuning. So you're going to get a drum dial. Marcus Sierra, I'm going to like your post here and email me, dave@drumeo.com. dave@drumeo.com, and I'll send you one of those. Okay, now we're going to give away the drill bit. It might sound silly, but you saw how fast you took off that head.
Oh man, it's
crazy.
It's the best tool I ever had.
Yeah,
it's so good.
When I tune, I usually take all my drums and I sit down in front of the TV and I kind of just relax and takes an evening to do.
Yeah.
But if I'm in a rush, I got to get one of those dials.
It's handy, man. It's the best.
Okay, here we go. This one's going to go to Jimmy Smith. Jimmy Smith, you have won a drum dial, not a drum dial, sorry.
Torque key.
No, torque key was the one we just gave away, the drill bit.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Jimmy Smith, I do a full top and bottom tune whenever I move my kit or there is a drastic temperature change. Very good point.
Good answer.
Whenever I sit down to play, I check my tuning to make sure and do a couple of tweaks, and I change my heads whenever I can afford to do so. Usually the snare and kick more often than the toms. Keep up the good work, guys. Cool. Thanks, Jimmy. And you have a good point. The temperature changes do affect the tuning of them, and snare and bass drum are usually the ones that I change more than ever because I hit those more. So cool. Email me, dave@drumeo.com. You got yourself a drill bit. Hopefully you have a drill to use it with because they're awesome. All right, so now we're talking about bass drum.
Cool. So right now I got this old drum head off, and I'm just gonna throw that down. And usually wipe off the dust. You can see all the dust flying here.
That's a good.
These things all the felt, the dust from your felt beaters and everything. Take a rag or whatever. So you clean this off a little bit, just because. Kind of get if there's sometimes little fuzzes get inside your edges. Just check them over with your hand. So what I'm going to do is right here we got a Evans EMAD 2. Brand new out of the box.
Beautiful.
So nice. I take the foam rings out because I don't want any kind of muffling on my drum before I tune it. kind of, I don't like the way that affects the tuning. So I'll just line it up. Usually put the logo right to the top.
That's very important.
Very important.
Very
Most companies,
important.
they want you to use their logo at the top. That's great. And with this key, these tension rods actually have a quick key, which I'm not the biggest fan of. I find it faster to use a drill.
Of course.
So for this demonstration, I have to use my fingers here on these. So
Wow.
I'm not actually tightening these up. I'm just getting them started.
While you're doing that, I'm going to answer some questions. Toolbox asks, hey, I have a few questions. Hope you can answer them.
Cool.
Hey, Toolbox. He says, number one, how important are the Reso heads?
Reso heads are actually extremely important. They will dictate more the shape of the sound that's coming off your drum, and it'll give it more sustain. And you can actually you can alter the sustain big time with a Reso head. And a lot of guys say, "Oh, I hate tuning those things. I just pulled them off." I go, "Man, your drums are not going to sound the same."
Yeah, totally.
They're going to sound so different. And that's cool too, whatever works for you, but I would definitely suggest using them, and they're extremely important.
Yeah. He also says, a few days before I changed my Reso head and my snare drum, I also changed the plastic wraps that hold the snare wires in place. He changed it from an elastic band, and he thinks it sounds even better. Now, I don't know what you mean by elastic band, but I guess, does that even matter what kind of material you have that holding your snare wires?
On some forums, yes. Some forums, no.
Okay.
We all know the forum thing.
The safe answer.
The safe answer is probably not. Probably not going to change a whole
No.
lot. And it could be the fact that you just put a new drum head on too with it.
Mm-hmm.
That makes it sound better.
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, there's arguments for and against. I would generally say it doesn't make a whole lot of difference. But that's just me and what I found.
I just reloaded the web or the inbox here with all the questions. And there's a lot of questions, so hopefully we'll get to all of them.
Hopefully we'll get to
But
this.
it is a Monday lesson, so we got a lot of stuff planned.
Here we go. So
All right.
basically, got this drum head on. You can see here, it's a little wrinkly. Tons of wrinkles in it. Super loose. Got it all finger tight. And one thing I like about the turning thing is I can actually get down here and tune this a lot easier. And I actually like to use a mallet because I can actually get tone out of it. I can actually get tone versus this.
Yeah.
Just all you hear is smacking, and here I can get rumble. Now this head is super loose right now, so I mean I'm gonna have to do the mixture of a key and the fingers here. Gonna have to go in the same star pattern.
Perfect.
I hate that when I do that with the different keys like that.
Now this one is how many? It's a 10 lug.
This is a 10 lug.
10 lug.
Most bass drums are gonna be a 10 lug.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have some kind of tone here now. And it's kind of waffly at this point. I can see I still have a few wrinkles right here, so I'm just going to give it a little bit. That one feels pretty tight, so I'm going to give just a few little additional torques here, just so I can get the wrinkles out of it.
Now I will also mention that you're not tuning this with any muffling in the head, right? You took all the muffling out.
This drum is empty with no muffling on any head.
Do you recommend that for bass drum tuning?
Absolutely. It I find that it alters the sound, and it alters sometimes if the blanket's touching at the bottom, those bottom keys that you're tuning are gonna sound way different,
Yeah.
so you can't get accurate.
Yeah.
It's very tough. So it's kind of roughly where I want it to go now. It's a brand new head, so I would give it some pushing.
Yeah.
You can put it down on the floor. You can do whatever. So I just lay my fist into it for a little while. And bass drums, especially, what I like to do is tune them super high. Super high,
Okay.
like I would say like even 3 or 4 rounds higher than you normally would, and I would leave it I like to leave it overnight, and it actually helps stretch the head. And I find bass drums definitely stay in tune longer that way. But for this, we don't have time to do that. So what we're going to do is skip that step. And then once you do that, you raise it all the way up. Don't just bring it down to the tone you want. Bring it right back down to 0, to finger tight, and then start again.
I see. Now nothing really changes when you're doing this from the snare drum you just did. You're listening to the same nuances, the same
thing,
irregularities, trying to make sure they all sound the same.
This drum, or it could be the drum or the head that it's this whole side of the bass drum right now is feeling it's the same kind of tension. It's all the same, but it's feeling really floppy just on this side here. So I gotta have to, either push it a bit, kind of stretch everything out, and then even add some extra tension on this one side just to kind of get it going the same sound. There we go.
Cool.
And why put it up on a table is because you actually get your ear down to it.
Yeah. I think that's the biggest tip right there.
So I'm getting a nice kind of even rumble. And bass drums, you're not going to tune a ton of, you're not going to keep going up and up. So I tend to get it to as low as I can and leave it for my overall tone. So that's basically where I would leave it at this point, and I would play it and see what happens, and it'll stretch and that kind of thing too. And then what's great with these is probably for this bass drum, I like emptier bass drums, so I'll put maybe a thicker foam on the batter head so I can have less inside.
And what kind of bass drum head is this again?
This is an Evans EMAD 2.
EMAD 2, that comes with the ring there.
Comes with the ring. I think this is the right. Gives a nice, it kind of muffles the head a bit.
Yeah.
They're nice. You don't have to have this. It's not the key thing. This one just came with this. It's great. So when you get it's got a nice smack. It's got a nice attack. This is a birch shell, so it's going to have a really focused tone. But with that, I almost wouldn't put any muffling inside.
Yeah, it sounds so nice.
Pretty good right where it is. So.
What's the rule of thumb for Reso heads on the bass drum for tension? We'll quickly talk about that. I know there's probably a lot of people question with that.
Usually I go a little bit higher than the batter head, and I'd make sure I get all the wrinkles out of it. That's super important. But I do go a little bit higher because I like a bit more boomy sustain coming off the front end, and so I don't usually tune them equally. I tune this one a bit higher, and see, you can hear it actually. It's quite a bit higher than this one.
Yeah, I see.
It's like a 30. Like it's quite a bit higher, and then that actually I find just gives the drum a bit more length and projection. Like it kind of sounds a little bit longer.
Cool.
So that's what I like, my preference anyway.
Jason actually taught a lesson on how to get a good sound out of your bass drum.
Yeah.
In the archives for any of your members that really want to dive into the bass drum sound, because tuning your bass drum is a huge task for a lot of people. Me too. So that's a whole hour lesson just on the bass drum. So
yeah, I find bass drums really difficult because of the low tone, and it's oftentimes if you're not comfortable and get your head down to it, it sounds sort of the same when you're up here.
Yeah.
So you don't actually get it tuning any better. If you get your head down here, you actually can get it tuned a lot nicer. So bass drums are a bit tricky.
Cool.
So.
And at the very end, you might throw a patch on where the bass drum beater is.
we got a patch here, and basically to do that, these Evans pads here, I would just take it off, put it on the level surface. Pull up the pedal you're using, latch it on. I'm not going to latch it on necessarily right now.
You don't even need to stick it on. You get the idea.
No, the idea is what you can see. Yeah, I can see on the video here. I'll take the patch out, make sure my bass drum's hitting where I want it to in the center, like we talked about in the other video, and then put it on right where your battery is. So it's super easy. Just make sure you have your pedal there to get it in the right spot. So.
Cool. Excellent. Okay, we have literally got tons of questions here. Okay, so can we quickly talk before we go on? I know the tuning is tuning for the tom the exact same. I'll actually take off one of my toms here, give it to you. Maybe you can very quickly, briefly talk about it.
Sure.
So I'm just gonna take this mic off there, hang it right down there. All right, there you go. This is a Casey drum. Beautiful. This is Babingo.
This is looks pretty good.
Daniel J. Jones says,
awesome.
Casey drums never need tuning, right?
You know what? They need a lot less tuning. No. Yeah, it's good to tune any drum. Absolutely.
Okay, so while you're taking that off and going through this emotions again, I'm going to ask you another question. Okay, this one here is from... One sec here. Mikey Mayhem, he says, when I first began playing the drums, I had a great deal of difficulty tuning my drums. A guy at the local guitar shop told me I should tune them melodically, insert the note values, I don't remember which ones, but my drums will sync up better with other musicians. Was he messing me around or what?
Let's just say he might have been more of a fanatic. Maybe that's weird. I get that question all the time, and
like tuning to a certain
tuning to a note, like tuning your drums to notes and tuning the top pitch and the bottom pitch at a certain note and stuff like that. And it's great if you want to go for it and you want to take the 8 hours of extra time that might take to get your drum sounding that way for for the short amount of time that it might actually stay there. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of work for maybe not much of a better result, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. If you get a good ear and you tune enough, you'll know the sweet spots of your drums with certain heads, and you won't need a pitch to tune it to.
Yeah. That's a tough one.
It's tough. It's personal preference, and if a guy wants to spend the time to do that, go right ahead. But like a lot of guys like me for me, I'd rather play my drums than spend the day tuning them.
Exactly.
That's just my opinion. I'm sure they sound great, but one story that I do know of is a guy that was recording a big major label record, and the producer wanted them to tune each drum to the notes in the song, and so it took like 8 times longer because they'll finish one song and then they strip the whole kit down, put new heads on it, retune everything. 2 days later, they're ready to track the 2-hour session.
Holy cow!
It's like, what?
Where do you get the money to sit in the studio for that?
Like, where do you get the money? Yeah, it's like it gets a bit extreme. I'm not the biggest fan of that. So,
Noodle says, "Hey Jason and Dave, great ideas on tuning. Cool. Thank you." He says, "Whenever you break a head, it can warp the drum. And so, what are some warning signs when you know you need to change your drum before it breaks?"
It can warp the drum.
He says, "Whenever you break a head, it can warp the drum. Maybe because the tension all of a sudden." Okay. I've never really heard of that, but
yeah, maybe you might warp your drum rim, maybe. Yeah. But your shell won't. Nothing should happen to your shell.
Yeah.
And if it does, you need a different drum.
What about like any tips of exactly. Any tips of when to look for warning signs on that? I guess we talked about that with that one head.
Yeah, with that one head, oftentimes I've busted heads straight through the middle and they were almost brand new too. So it's pretty tough to get a warning sign.
Yeah.
I usually go off of just the wear signs that we talked about at the beginning, and that oftentimes the heads aren't actually breaking; they just get old. Mm-hmm. So.
Cool.
Sometimes you get like a lemon head. It just kind of does something funny.
I've had a 2-ply head on the bass drum once where one of the plies on the back end broke, but the other one was still there. So I kept using it for like 6-7 months afterwards. It's really weird sometimes. Okay, so now you're tuning the tom the exact same method using, that's an 8-inch.
This is a 10.
Not an 8 lug.
Yeah, so I kind of got them all they're feeling pretty close here to finger tight. This one's a little off. So start again, same start pattern, half turn. So I do it. And see, it's not high enough at all. I'm just getting like this kind of waffle sound. So I'm going to go up maybe just a quarter turn. Just to see if I can get some tone to start tuning with. So you're going to go through the same process. See, it's out. Same process as all the rest. I know this is so exciting to watch me tap on a drum for a long time, but basically you're going to do the same thing. And now, if you get the top where you want it and you are changing your bottom, do the exact same process. I just usually tune my batters a little bit higher than the tops, and that basically gives the drum a bit of a falling sound, like the tone actually kind of drops off at the end. Mm-hmm. If you go even, it sounds good, but it sounds more of like a straight line pitch, and it'll just kind of get quieter and quieter, whereas I like the sound to kind of dive off. Mm-hmm. So that's why I go a bit higher on the bottoms.
Excellent.
So it's the exact same thing, start pattern, same deal. Stretch your heads when they're new. Same principles.
Excellent. keep that there just in case you have some questions regarding tuning that you can answer on that.
Cool.
And I'll say one more thing. You did have an alternate pattern on the tuning map.
Absolutely. The alternate pattern works on 10 lugs, which is most snare drums and bass drums. And basically it's like top, bottom, over to the left 2, opposite, over to the left 2, opposite. And yeah, I don't usually do that because it's faster for me, just the way I've learned to tune and gotten quick at it and accurate at it is just going in the straight pattern and not having to change my my tuning pattern with different lug drums. But that's actually a good pattern that a lot of guys use, and they say that it actually you actually get a little bit more accurate quickly because they're not going next to each other. You're kind of spacing them out more evenly. But that's a great pattern if you want to learn that for your snare drum, your bass drum. It's really handy too.
Now, a lot of people right now in the chat, like did he say tune the Reso head higher for the toms? Can you tune it lower? What's the difference between those two?
You can tune it lower, but you kind of get this like waffly sound underneath, and you'll get kind of maybe sometimes a little like a wiggle in the sound. It'll kind of wah wah wah. You'll kind of get a weird kind of like an interruption in pitch, kind of. So I usually don't tune them low and lower than the tops, but I usually go at least a little bit higher.
Yeah. Cool.
So,
all right. So before I get to we'll do the last 2 giveaways for the Drumeo membership. So stick around. Cool. And in case you guys are just joining us now, I am still going to give away 2 monthly memberships for Drumeo. And all you need to do is go to facebook.com/Drumeo and tell us, first off, like our page first off, and then tell us how often do you tune your heads or how often do you change your skins on your kit. Okay, so that was quite a quick little demonstration there.
Yeah.
Let's get to some questions because we got a lot of questions regarding tuning. I'm going to start right from the top. We can be here. We can be here all evening. Okay, this one's from Robbie Carden. He says, "I have a Tay Gold kit." Drum set. It's a very small drum kit. Is there any tips you can give me for to make it tune in a lower key? Maybe suggest maybe a suggestion of drum head for small toms. He's got 12x6, 10x5.5, and 8x5.
So you want the drums to sound lower pitched.
Yeah.
With a kit like that, I would probably go with I would probably put coated heads on it at least to help warm it up, and I would probably put at least a G2 on the tops. I wouldn't, like some guys with smaller drums will say, oh, I'll go thinner heads, and that way I'll get more tone out of it. You get more tone, but you don't get as much body. So I still like to have a good 2-ply if I can for a thicker sound.
Very cool.
But a kit like that, I haven't built a kit like that super small, and haven't fooled around with like really short bass drums and stuff like that. But I would suggest giving maybe the resonance quite a significant higher pitch and keeping your batters pretty low. And that might get you some really nice thud, but then kind of keep that low thud ringing a little longer to make them sound a bit bigger. That's maybe where I would start.
Cool.
Yeah.
Jay Carroll says, "Hey, I got my 14x14 floor tom tuned great, but my 16x16 is giving me a lot of trouble. It rumbles on and on forever and annoys the heck out of me. I already have Evans EC2s and Moon Gel on it just to make just like the rest of my drums. Any tips?"
16x16 that's ringing.
The one thing I'd say, Jake, is first off, try your drum in another room and see what happens, because I've been in many different rooms where the different shape of it bounces off the waves of the sound waves a bit differently, and some drums do resonate differently. Yeah. So move it into the living room or outside and see if you get that same tone.
Sometimes the square drums will do that, like square by meaning like 12x12, 14x14. Those drums tend to have a lot of resonation, and 14s, I found too that 14x14s tune up a lot quicker than a 16x16. But yeah, like changing rooms would be a really good idea, because it might not necessarily be your drum where you're tuning. Yeah. Like you said, and that's often the case. So I would definitely try that first before you start fooling around with alternate mufflings and stuff like that.
Cool. Dave DeWave has a pretty cool question. He says, does lug count matter when it comes to sounding better or worse? I talked to a drummer that was all super proud of his custom 6-lug snare drum. He said it was hard to find hoops for it, but other than that, it sounded better, he thought. Other than less on the snare to muffle, do you think it would actually, or think a lug count would actually make a difference?
Yes, lug does definitely make a difference. A lot of guys, I prefer actually like 8-lug snare drums on 14-inch, and what I like about it is that there's a bit more character to the drum. It's not as even sounding. If I'm hitting right over the lug, they're all gonna be the same. But there's more space between the tension lugs, and so that gives a bit more room of flex in the rim, which kind of opens up the nuances and characteristics of the drum. So I find, that's a good argument that a 6-lug, was it, he said 12-inch diameter? Was it a 14?
He just said a 6-lug snare.
6-lug snare. Okay, so maybe it's a 14, but it will be very open sounding. It'll be very organic sounding. You're gonna get more nuances, and the snare won't be sounding like it's just a one sound shotgun. Yeah. You'll get a lot more creativity out of it.
Cool.
So
See, I didn't even know that. That's cool. Good little
So that definitely does make a big difference.
Okay, he says, William Young, for those of us who get relegated to a cold garage, how warm should it be when we do this? When we tune a drum or when we change the heads? Does the heat matter?
I would do it where it's consistent. I wouldn't bring them into your house, tune them where it's going to be 18 degrees or something, or Fahrenheit or Celsius depending. But like a house would be way warmer than your garage, so I wouldn't change the environment. I would tune them in the environment they're in, because the second that you bring them back to its original environment, it'll all go out.
Yeah.
So I don't even think that the room temperature is going to be the end all and be all. I think it's just the consistency that's going to be the biggest issue.
Excellent. Yeah. Paradiddle says, "Hey Dave and Jason." Hey Paradiddle. From a sound engineer's point of view, does he prefer a more open kick, say using a thin resonant front head, or a more tightened up sound muffle front head? Great lesson, by the way. Cool. I know you're not a sound engineer, but nope. I mean, you build kits for touring drummers all the time, and they know what to ask for. What is the common denominator here?
Bass drums like to be thick, boomy, and punchy, and that often will never come from a single-ply Reso head or single-ply batter head. Usually it's going to be a 2-ply batter and at least a thick single-ply with an extra plastic ring on the inside. So I usually will go fairly thick heads, like EQ3 heads by Evans is usually what I put on drum heads or kick drums. They sound really great, and they stay pretty consistent as well.
And you always recommend a hole in the Reso head as well?
Absolutely, yes.
I recommend that.
Yes.
Hands down. Okay, next question here. It's a quick one from Noodle. It says, "Hey Jason, can you give a very quick, because it's 10-2, very quick description of what each type of wood gives in terms of sound? Maybe the top 3.
Oh, man.
I know. It's quick. A question we get all the time. Very quick.
Let's just go maple, birch, and mahogany. Probably the 3 most common. Maple's going to be the most versatile drum. It's going to be more open sounding, punchier, boomier, more live sounding, and it's going to sound, how do you put it? It's extremely versatile. Birch is going to be a bit more focused. Sustain is going to be a little bit shorter. It's going to be a bit thuddier. It's not as higher pitched. You're not going to get as higher overtones out of it. It's going to be more of an EQ'd sounding drum. And then going to mahogany is just like a really warm, vintagey, classic, like makes your heart warm. When you hit it, like when you hit them, they're super low end. They got really low tone, and they mix really well in kind of lower volume settings. Yeah. Cool.
We have a lesson coming up with Jason where we're going to talk about all the different types of snare woods. I think you're going to bring in as many as you can, and we'll show you guys what they each sound like.
And we'll be hard pressed to get it all in an hour too. So
yeah, I know.
That was a super quick version.
Yeah, there's a lot to it, and I never even think about it. And whenever you start talking about it, I always forget how important those little things could be. C-Lock says, should you tune the Reso side before the batter side, or does that really matter? Great question, by the way.
I usually do, because that's maybe what I've gotten used to. When I assemble drums, I put the bottom one on first, because I feel once I'm done the bottom, I got it in the right tone range that I want it. The top is where I will normally do my variations from anyway. Mm-hmm. So I'll get the bass set with this, and then I'll put this on the top head and kind of bring it up and down to get the desired tone that I like.
Cool. Yeah. Sank asks, is there a way to repair a tom or a snare head, or just buy a new one and replace it? Thanks for the great lesson, by the way.
Cool. Definitely I would replace it. Duct tape will get you through a gig or through a song at a gig, and then I would just you basically get a new one.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not really repairable.
Not really repairable, no. Okay, sorry, one sec. Rob, and then there's another person who asked this question too. Any experience with the new TuneBot drum tuner?
TuneBot, I've never heard of it.
Neither have I.
No,
and it sounds. He said it was the new, so it sounds like something that might be something fairly new out in the scene. So I've never heard about it, but I'm going to check it out after this lesson, so I'm familiar.
Cool.
with it.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, C-Lock says, how do you get rid of snare buzz by the kick drum?
Usually I find the most times that you're going to get snare buzz is off of the first rack tom that's directly above your snare drum. And it's kind of always a bit of a myth why it happens, and a lot of people, there's no real right answer that it'll do what you want it to each time. But say my rack tom's right here in front of me and my snare drum's right here, I would basically go against the rules of tuning, and I would take that first lug that's directly adjacent to my snare drum, and I would detune it just a little. Okay. And I actually find that works super well. Now, you just can't do it a whole lot that it's going to really change the sound of your tom. And it goes against everything we're talking about.
No
but
kidding.
It's one of those weird things that actually works, and there's no real reason that I can explain why it works.
Weird.
But it actually, lots of different settings, and I've chat with lots of guys who play in arenas, and they'll go to theaters, and then they'll go to, and it's always different, but that one trick always still kind of holds true.
Very cool.
So you should try it and see if it works for you.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Colin Olson, these are all such great questions, guys, by the way. Colin Olson says, does lubricating your lugs during tuning help tuning and make it easier? I was rumored that this was the case.
I actually don't put any lube in any of my lugs. If you have a good quality drum with good quality parts, you won't necessarily have to do that. Usually the lube is to lube up low quality and make them feel like a good quality drum.
Yeah.
So more of a practical reason why I don't like to do that is because if I'm maybe spraying something on, or you're going to spray your drum, it might even eat your finish, which would be terrible. Or also it starts to attract all the dust and your sawdust and your shavings just from being on your kit, and because the lube is actually a bit sticky. And so then after a while you'll start tuning and you'll start grinding the sawdust into your lugs as well. Yep. And then it just binds up all your threads, and then you end up stripping it, and then so good quality parts usually is the better way to go.
Yeah. Tank Boss says, is there any tuning tricks to reduce snare sizzle? We just talked about that, so I'll move on. Give me one sec here. Brett says, hey, my 16-inch floor tom sounds flat and dead. I want much more resonance from it. That's how bad it sounds. I have turned it upside down and don't hear much of a difference in the resonance. What am I doing wrong?
It's going to depend on what kind of drum it is as well. Like wood is going to play a big role in that. It's going to play a role in the quality of your edges. It's going to play a role. It's not just going to be the head and the tuning that you put on it, but given it's maybe at least a semi-professional drum kit or a professional drum kit.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to take it to a different room is what I would do first of all. So he wants it to be bigger and boomier. Is that what he's asking?
Yeah. Sounds dead right now.
Sounds dead.
Yeah.
I have found sometimes that a 16-inch floor tom, I'll tune the top head tighter than I would a 14, and I know it sounds kind of weird. Like I usually like to have the tensions all sort of the same, feeling to them. But sometimes 16s require the batter head just to kind of be raised a little bit. And same if you go to an 18-inch, you're going to have to bring your batter head up quite a bit more than you would maybe feel comfortable with.
Yeah. To
get that extra oomph to it. Because tuning the bottom will just it'll help, but you'll probably have to do the top as well. So maybe try that.
Cool.
Give the top a tune.
Hopefully that helps.
Hopefully, yeah.
I don't want to keep pushing things, but it is almost 5 o'clock for us.
Crazy.
So it's been an hour. But what we're going to do is, because there's so many questions, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give away the last two things, which are the 2 memberships for Drumeo for the month, okay? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of say our goodbyes type of deal, but I'm also going to keep going and answering these questions. So if you guys, people who have questions still submitted, you guys want to stick around, we're going to go a little bit later and make sure we get those questions answered.
Sounds good.
Especially on a tuning lesson like this. I mean, these are just brilliant, some of these questions.
Yeah.
Try to teach how to tune a drum in an hour. It's tough.
It's really tough. Yeah.
Thanks very much, everybody, for coming out. If you guys have to leave, go for it. It's not a big deal, but I'm going to give away those 2 memberships first, okay? So let me just refresh the page here. Okay. By the way, one of the questions in there was, what kind of heads do you put on Casey drums when you give them to your customers?
Cool. Usually it is your choice. Evans is what I like to put on. Usually, most of the time we're doing G2 coateds on tops and G1 clears on the bottoms. And sometimes snares vary a lot, but those are usually the good combos that I like to use. But it is essentially your choice.
Cool. All right, so here we go. For a month membership of Drumeo, first one goes to, and if you already have Drumeo, let me know. Don Tizoo, Tizzoo, or Tizzoo, whichever way. I play for a half a year now. I'm tuning my snare every week. The toms, depending on how I like the sound, I should do that more often. Thanks so much for the lessons. I've actually never tried to tune my bass drum, though. I'll try to do that tomorrow. Cool, Don.
Awesome, man.
That's very cool. Tuning your snare that often, I mean, yes, I make sure my snare's feeling good every time I sit behind the kit.
Yep.
It's the heart of the drum.
Absolutely.
It's heart of your kit, sorry. Is that yours? The other thing I'd say, Don, is tune your bass drum. Go home tomorrow, take a look at this lesson in the archives. Again, if you don't have the archives, you just want a free membership to Drumeo, so now you have access to the archives.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
That's sweet.
Email me, it's dave@drumeo.com. Next person to win the month membership is Kathy Cast. Kathy says, I check and tune them once a month, except for the kick. Always putting that off because I'm not good at it. Cool, Kathy. You know what? I was never good at tuning my bass drum. I got more frustrated tuning my bass drum than any other drum, and I'd always just do the last minute tweaks and put as much muffling in there as possible.
Did you take it off of the kit?
Nope, not when I was young.
There you go.
When you first told me that trick, I was like, that makes total sense.
Yeah,
Gotta be
it makes a
comfortable.
huge difference.
Cool. So, Kathy, I've liked your post. Email me, dave@drumeo.com, and I'll set you up with a free month of Drumeo. Okay, guys, thanks for coming out. We're going to keep going a little bit longer just to answer those questions. And stick around because I'm sure there's going to be tons of cool, useful information there for you. Okay, getting back to it.
Cool.
I'm going to start right from the top here again. Okay, by the way, the question about what kind of heads you put on, that was from Greg Patterson.
Cool.
All right, Mikey Mayhem says, when I first began the drums, I had a great deal of difficulty tuning. Sorry, we actually already answered that one. Okay, sorry. Okay, that one we've already answered. Rhythm 45 says, I know some people say when tuning the snare drum and the resonant head, they suggest loosening or sometimes tightening around the snare bed to help reduce buzz from the other instruments. What do you guys suggest?
Usually I would end up tuning them a little bit higher. That's my preference, to make the snare drum sound a little bit better and get rid of some of the buzz. I find going down sounds not so great.
Yeah.
I'd rather go higher and get a bit more, nuanced ring out of the drum than kind of make it sound a bit deader.
And you're talking about the lugs here. I'm going to pass this. You want to show them what he's talking about?
So when you have basically, let's put this right here. When you have your stair wires, usually the snare bed is going to go from point to point roughly in this zone. So these two lugs, these four was what I would actually tune a little bit higher. If you can see those, the camera there, yeah. I would actually tune these a little bit higher because the shell actually dips down a little bit. And so you need to tighten the head up there a little bit more. So those would be the 4 points that I would actually raise up a little bit more if I needed to.
Cool.
So,
very cool point. Okay, this one here is from Drumjack. He says, Drumjack52 says, what about using any mechanical or electronic aid for tuning? Any thoughts on this? Drum dial's a mechanical aid. Mm-hmm. Your drill bit's a mechanical aid.
Yeah.
I don't know about electronic aid. I guess a tune bot might be one of those.
Maybe, yeah. I should check out what that is, actually.
The one thing I'll say, yeah, exactly. So should I. The one thing I'll say about using all these aids, they're great and they help out for speed and all that. But like Jason was saying, nothing really does beat your ear, and you want to be able to tune your own drums by your own ear because you never get you'll get to a gig when you need to tune a kit that it's not yours. You don't have that device with you.
Yeah.
You want to be able to do that on the fly, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Rhythm 45 says, I'm old school in seating up a new head. Crank it up, let it crack out overnight, and then retune in the morning. I know new school thought, put the head on and push down with your hands. Personally, I feel that puts an uneven pressure on the head, which might cause premature wear out. What do you think about that?
I agree with the old school way too, man. If you got the time, you're going to get a better result for sure. But if you're pushing down, just make sure you got it in the center, and then you shouldn't really have uneven weight. If you're pushing right down on the outside, yeah, of course. But definitely, if you got to go that route, which is totally okay, I have never had drum heads break sooner than doing it the other way. Just make sure you're pushing in the center. Don't go putting your elbow into the edge, or then you'll get uneven wear on your head.
Now, when you're talking about cranking it really tight, is there any point where it's too tight where you're going to maybe warp the rim?
Warp the rim.
I smile because that might have happened to me once.
You know what? I don't crank it so that I got to use a different key with longer leverage. I usually will do like 3 or 4 passes higher than my normal tuning range. And on a snare drum, you can go quite a bit more. On a tom, you can go higher, but it's the way I kind of do it is if it sounds like a really high pitched jazz tom, then I've got it pretty good. Then I'll leave it at that.
Cool.
I'm not gonna tune it so it's choked and doesn't sound like anything.
Yeah. JB3 says, "Hey Dave, I sent you a question about tension rods. Was it too early?" JB3, I don't think I got it, unfortunately. So please submit it again if you're still here watching. Paradiddle just sent me the link for TuneBot. Thank you, Paradiddle. I'm gonna go check that out. Sweet. And maybe I might get one if it's
Send that to me too. I'd love to see that.
Yeah, we'll do. I think just to give it a little bit of a plug, it's tune-bot.com.
Cool.
Hopefully it's good now. John J. Dubs Weiss says, "Hey John," he says, "Hey, what are some tips to make a lower quality wood sound like a higher quality wood? Is there any tuning things you can do with that, or I mean, it's kind of get what you pay for type of deal?"
You get what you pay for, but thicker drum heads.
Yeah.
Pinstripes or EC2s, something thick. Yeah.
Onyx.
Hydraulics.
Yeah. Mask it a bit.
That will definitely help mask the lower quality wood, for sure.
Yes. T-Crush says the snare vibe come from frequency stacking. Thus, by detuning part of the drum that affects it, reduces that. I think he's talking about what we were discussing before about the snare buzz. Yeah. And detuning that one lug, which you talked about, does work.
Yeah.
Okay, Dave M. Now, I'm not sure about what even this is, so I'll just let you, maybe you've heard about it. Any value to rubbing saddle soap on the rims?
Saddle soap on the rims. Well, that's just going to basically keep the rims from not catching. It's going to help the rim not kind of get friction with the actual drumhead rim. You know what? That sounds like a mess to me.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge fan of adding extra lubricants and stuff to the drum because they always make their way out of the drum afterwards and it makes a mess and you track stuff. And you know what? There's a lot of great little tips like that. So if that works for you, go for it. I generally speaking don't actually recommend putting any lubrication onto a lot of stuff. And sometimes if I have to, it's on the snare throw-offs.
Yeah. Because
there's so many mechanical parts that have to work together perfectly to do the right operation. So in that case I would, but for rims and that kind of stuff, if you have fairly decent equipment, you're not necessarily need to go that route.
Cool. Couple more questions here. Blue Pearl Oyster says, the shell edges on a couple of my 68 Ludwig toms are nicked a little because my brother took the Reso heads. He's no longer with us. What do you recommend I fill them up with? I was just going to use some Carpenter's wood filler. What would you suggest? You give me that little cringe face. I think I know what that means.
You can repair bearing edges by filling them with composites and stuff. Like a wood filler or like an auto body filler. It's going to change the look of your drum because you're putting all this patchwork on it. But at this point, if you got a great old Ludwig like that, it would be a shame to kind of do that. So what I would probably do is I would actually maybe try recutting the edges. And then doing that, you can actually get rid of that totally.
Oh, cool.
So,
got to be a pretty good boost.
You're going to want to find either a drum shop that knows a repair guy or somebody. You can email me and we can work something out and figure out what to do, but recutting would probably be the best fix.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Dave the Way says, I've had drums where a few lugs were burred. So I had to be aware while tuning because these few lugs were harder to physically turn, making it feel different. Mm-hmm. That's pretty common, actually.
That is very common.
In fact, that's happened to me to the point where I'm literally like I have to go and keep cleaning them out, and it sucks.
Yeah.
T Crush says, when you tune, do you tune like you would a guitar, or does that really matter?
Tune like you tune a guitar?
Yeah, I'm not sure really what you mean by that.
Yeah, I'm
Like-
not totally sure what you mean, but
Maybe he's talking about per the note, and we've talked about that earlier in the lesson. So maybe that was an old question. Colin Olson says, how do snare wires affect the sound? That's a good question, no, Colin. I still have the original snares on, and I want to know if if there's different snare wires for different styles.
yeah, there are definitely different number of strands and materials that they're made out of. But if you have an old snare wire, usually what it's going to be is it's going to be the metal's fatigued, and so it's going to start to lose its springiness, and so I would get something new like a 30 strand or even a 20 strand or something like that. Those are really great. But an old snare wire is just going to get fatigued. The metal's going to get fatigued, and that's where when you need to switch them out, and that might be from a 20-year-old drum at least. So
It's tough. Mike McAlco brought in an old 70s recording custom. I think it was the 70s. It's an old recording custom snare. Hasn't changed the head or the snare wires. Sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
It's really weird, Sometimes you just get those gems. Sometimes it just falls into place.
Absolutely.
Okay, we got one last question.
Great.
Okay. And actually, no, sorry, two last questions, and then we're done for the day. JB3 says, my tension rods on the floor toms sometimes become loose and even fall out if I'm not paying attention. Is there anything I can do about this? A suggestion that I've had before was to dab some silicone sealer on them. Sounds messy to me. What would you suggest?
Sounds messy to me. You can get like little tension rod locks or like little plastic nylon locks, and that basically stops your lug from backing out. Those are actually a great clean way to do it.
Yeah.
Silicone sealer sounds kind of messy to me. And again, I've had issues with many types of lubrications, staining your drums or wrecking something.
Yeah.
They always end up wrecking something. So don't do that, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's like these, I don't know, they're called lug locks or something like that. Little plastic nylon tips I put on, and what I do is if I have that issue, I actually just try to keep on top of my tuning a bit more.
Yeah.
And if you're checking your floor tom every time you go play a gig, you probably won't have that issue.
Can you get lug locks at your local music store? Like, it does maybe Gibraltar sell a bag of them, or?
I think so. I think they come in like little packs, and you most likely at a bigger music outlet you'll get them.
Okay, because that's very, very important. I know I've had a kit where there was nothing on there, and it was just the tension rod and the rim. And then when you do rim shots and stuff, you're actually moving your rim a little bit, and it's going to slowly loosen them.
Yeah,
makes
exactly.
sense.
Yeah.
Very good question, JB3. Glad we got to it. Last question of the day. Sorry, guys, I know we missed one or two in there, but Monday lessons we usually don't even get a chance to get to most of the questions. During the week, though, we're always answering all the questions, and it's a lot of fun, and we connect with you guys quite well. So T-Crush says, tune up, as in the tone, low to high pitch. I guess he's talking about, do you always tune up or tune down? I know I've had that question asked to me before when you're going for a certain pitch.
Yep. I always go down. Like if my drum is too high, I will loosen it way lower and then bring it up to the pitch. I always tune from the low up to the high. And you'll notice guitar players always do that as well. Any stringed instruments, they always bring it back down and keep it at its tension. Because when you're at a certain tension and you just want to bring it down, sometimes it kind of goes a little bit too far. So you always need to bring it back up so it's under proper tension. So from low to high is definitely the only way to go.
Cool. All right, guys. Thank you for sticking with us. I know this is a little bit longer than usual, but it was a great free lesson. Thank you very much, Jason, for coming out.
It was fun, man.
Great. You're always a plethora of great info. And you build drums for a living, so, I mean, you have a pretty good insider's approach to all this kind of stuff. So.
No, thanks for having me. This was awesome.
Cool. Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you very much for coming out. Tomorrow we have Mike McAlco in, and we're talking about how to hold your sticks. And then we on Thursday, everybody who's watching this right now, public, we are going to be live again for free on Thursday. It's our Drumeo 100th lesson spectacular bonanza.
Very cool.
So we're going to broadcast that one live. We've got a really cool announcement to make for that. So Thursday, it's going to be on 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Make sure you're out for that. Very cool. Okay, everybody, thank you very much, and I'll see you all on Thursday.
Cool.